Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. This consists of a question and answer period, but I think I'll begin with a little talk. And the title of the talk is about the nature of the influence of association. And this is not meant necessarily about the people who surround you, although it includes that, but it's more along the lines of the influence of media. And I chose this because, of course, it's in the air now, isn't it? The vast web, the internet, has produced all kinds of interesting, both positive and negative effects on different stratas of the population, different age groups, different political groups, different intellectual groups. And this topic comes up and is talked about a lot, and it might be helpful to go back to the influences that the Buddha talks about. And this has reminded me that the first two of the blessings of life are not to associate with the foolish, is the first blessing of life, and to associate with the wise is the second blessing of life. And so association is not just hanging out with somebody, but it's also the association with ideas. And so, of course, when you are associating with people, you're picking up their ideas, and sometimes their demand that you conform to their standards. And this can be very uplifting sometimes, and it can be very degrading at other times, very problematic at other times. Now, the person doesn't have to be standing in the room. This is about ideas as well. And of course, ideas circulate certainly long before the internet came into existence, but they circulated through other media, circulated through books and magazines, radio, television. And of course, the written word has been around for a considerable length of time, but in terms of the general population, only a couple of centuries where large portions of the population could actually read, took the time to read, and of course, books were much more rare than they are now. Now you can just pump them out because of the internet as well. Before, it was a laborious and expensive process where you had to produce the book, paper, and all this kind of stuff. So now we're swamped with information, and that means we're swamped with association as well. And so what should we do about it? Now, there's two levels to this, and there's a big arguments back and forth about censoring ideas and not allowing certain things to be said, and etc. Now, that's a social and political decision. What I'm talking about really is a personal decision. And when it comes to your personal well-being in mind, you are the Supreme Court. You are the government. You have complete control, and you should exercise it. And it's just a matter of realizing that you might have the idea that you should expose yourself to everything without discrimination somehow that is beneficial. Actually, it's not. In fact, you need, and you will experience negative results from just random ideas. And if you can't sort through them well with good discrimination, then you need some help. And so you should think about some basic categories. So some of the basic categories is that we consider a person virtuous if they are not advocating the killing of beings, the theft of their property, sexual misconduct, deception, lies, blatant lies, harsh speech, malicious speech. So harsh speech is using all kinds of name-calling and denigrating terms and so forth. And then malicious speech is the attempt to divide people, telling faults of one person over the other and get, et cetera, trying to drive a wedge between people or groups, et cetera. So this is, of course, just rampant in the media. And then finally, just trivial and frivolous speech. And the last category is to do with the advocacy of intoxicants. In other words, to get through life by just staying drunk all the time, stoned, drunk, etc. So there's advocacy of all of these things. Some people seem to think it's not okay in certain circumstances to lie, but in, say, political situations, it's all is fair in love, war, and politics. It's not. It's not okay. So these are some ways to sort out things and to clarify in your mind what is it that you can associate with. So these are not associating with people necessarily, but with ideas. And of course, the ideas are coming through the mouths of people. They come through the mouths of people in two forms. One is the what we call rhetoric, which is a strong emotional type of language. The extreme is, say, a 4-hour speech by Hitler, where you hear a lot of shouting and kind of that it's pure emotional rhetoric. And this is the way sometimes religious sermons are, sometimes political sermons, rousing people for various causes like war, etc. So that is very powerful, and generally people are the general population is very swayed by that. And then there's reasoned argument, where one actually has to provide substantial reasons behind their ideas. So you'll find that if you want a large audience, primarily rhetoric will do it more than reason. And even back to the time of Plato, who is designed some of the systems which we use to the present, including democratic systems. Lamentably, he and Aristotle said that whether they didn't approve of it, but if two people give a speech, the one who uses rhetoric and emotion always sways the crowd better than the one who uses reason. However, hopefully you're not the crowd, and that you're not swayed by mere emotive language. I must say, though, that as I say this, I know that it's simply not something that people have a switch that they can change to. If you haven't been exposed to some training in reason, and what are empty arguments, what are the type of arguments, the type of persuasion that people use, which are valid and which are invalid or non-valid, in other words, just pure emotional type of talk, then it won't help to ask you to overlook the emotive language and just go to the reasoned language. So that is a good way to practice educating yourself, is to reflect, is it reason that I'm responding to? What are the reasons? What are the facts? What are the cases that persuade me versus the opposite, which the emotional persuasion? Primarily as well, there's just too much, people indulge too much in the flow of information, and this is, in some ways, it just becomes frivolous. This happened prior to the internet as well, with just television, where television is just on all the time. It's staggering. People have them in their washrooms, in their kitchens, in their living rooms, and then when you go to sleep, it's in your bedroom as well. The thing is on And sometimes people can't sleep without the television on. So that's a tragedy. I find that a tragedy, that one cannot face one's own experience of life without having some sort of soothing distraction in the background. This can happen with just the radio being on all day long as well, pop music and talk radio, and it's just basically a distraction from the experience of existence. So certainly in the monastic life, we try to reduce this kind of distractions so that we can actually have the experience of facing ourselves. And we do have, of course, an opportunity to talk and to listen. The Buddha was left behind some of the largest body of discourses in history, in religious history, all by one person. If you look at the Bible, for instance, the sayings of Christ are probably can be written on 2 or 3 napkins, and the Old Testament is a group of a compendium of books from different authors, etc. So with the teachings of the Pali Canon, you'll see a vast collection of a single individual spoken over a period of 45 years. The Buddha lived to be 80 years old. And those are retained very carefully by a large group of people and memorized. So it's not that speech or abundant speech is wrong. It's just the quality of the speech, the attitude of the speech. Is it promoting generosity, kindness, clarity, or is it promoting the opposite? Is it promoting greed, hatred, and confusion and delusion? So these are the questions that you ask yourself. And to feel entitled to be highly censorious in your imbibing of information, because you are eating it and drinking it. It is nourishing your mind, and it may be sort of like junk food. It may be a problem for your health, or it may be healthy for you. It may be restore you, uplift you, clarify this. And you should be highly concerned and conscious of it. I think, though, that people indulge in junk media for the same reason that they indulge in junk food. It's a way to pass the time. It's a way to avoid the discomfort of life. So people are compulsive eaters. Why are you a compulsive eater? Why are you compulsively being distracted by any kinds of media? Is because it's uncomfortable to be without it. So there's a sense of primary discomfort, alienation, problems, and you are resorting to distraction to soothe it. Often stuffing food in one's face all day long shows just a lack of the feeling of goodwill and affection. So when one feels empty, lonely, etc., so one turns to these sources. The stronger ones are drugs. So drugs are quite often painkillers, forms of distraction, painkiller. And media can be that way as well. And so these are something to be very, very concerned about, and to exercise strong control of it. And if you have the view that you should be listening to everything, that it's okay to be a, so quote, news junkie, somehow that's a good thing to be, you should reconsider that, reflect on that, and what it does to you, and how it affects you and your relationship to others. There are also, of course, people that fall into this way of very negative views, very problematic views that advocate greed, hatred, and delusion, and you're going to have to make some decisions about whether to withdraw from association. Some people seem to think it's a great tragedy that people are divided by these things, but it's not a great tragedy. It's a necessary thing to withdraw from toxic relationships. Toxic relationships even within one's family, when things get toxic, you simply have to. It's not a tragedy that you withdraw from it. If there's any tragedy to it at all, it's that humans can fall under this way of very negative, problematic ideas. And the antidote to that is not to simply just be with it, tolerate it, etc. It's that you must also take care of your own mind and your own well-being, and that you need to separate sometimes from people, sometimes from former friends, sometimes from whole societies as well. And you can see through history that people have, in fact, had to leave countries that their whole families have been in. They have left religions, they have left communities, they've left all kinds of places, and good on them, because sometimes it's really necessary. And don't necessarily believe that you can undo everybody else's problems, or that you should commit yourself to remaining in association with the hope that you can correct other people's negative ideas, because you may end up being infected or just wasting your time. So there is a certain amount of self-preservation involved, which is very important. Self-preservation is critical, and people who are good and just and honest are a treasure that the rest of the community needs. And if they need to if they're healthy like that, that's a healthy-minded person, they need to remain healthy, and they need to not be overwhelmed with these things. I've seen some indications lately that there's whole groups of caregivers and health givers in society that are actually burned out, stressed, and so forth. This includes, because of the pandemic as well, it includes doctors, it includes social workers, includes psychologists and psychiatrists. It includes law enforcement as well. They get, when the society is manifesting a lot of toxic personalities, and the side effects of that, and of course you know that especially youth, like the teens and so forth, are very affected by the ideas that they pick up on the internet, and displaying high percentages of mental illness and side effects, depression, even suicide, etc. So you can see that somebody has to deal with this as well. So it's not just that individual's problem, it spreads out to the people who are attempting to help them. So this is not something to be taken lightly. Personally taking your life as a very valuable and serious thing, and being careful who and what you associate with is important. And if you're a parent, then you should communicate that also to your teens, and by example. But if you have it playing all the time, and if you're in furious, emotive language, arguing with the TV, etc., then the example is given to the people you're raising as well. So you need to take your life seriously and preserve your well-being, because and this is also for advice for caregivers and everything. If professions get overworked and asked to do more than they should, they really need to withdraw from the situation. And you see this actually, nursing and so forth, they're having problems keeping staff because they exploited them too much. They, meaning the society in general. Society will exploit whole classes of people, professionals, social workers, etc., if you're willing to do it. And quite often these people are very dedicated and are convinced they're doing the good thing, and they're very good-natured. And they will be heroic in this. But society, that which supports them, is actually shifting burdens to them, and until it begins to fail. So those who are in these professions need to assess whether they're being actually exploited, and whether their good nature and their heroic attempts to help people are excessive, and that they need to step back and say, it's too much. I need to preserve my own well-being and health as well. So these are some ideas about this situation. And of course, it won't be the first time you've heard talk along these lines, but I thought I would give you the approach, the Buddhist approach. And it's very clear. Within the structure for monks and nuns, it's very clear that speech is very carefully governed and is very selective. We essentially, in Buddhism, there's no such thing as free speech. There's only right speech and wrong speech. And it's very clear that there is such a thing as wrong speech. It's not, everybody's opinion is fine. Everybody can have an opinion. Well, no, there are wrong opinions and right opinions. There's right speech and wrong speech. And if you indulge in the wrong and negative speech, then it wears on oneself and others. Whereas right speech is uplifting to both to oneself, one feels refreshed and after right speech, and others are uplifted by it as well. So some of the concepts, the very basic concepts of language you should reinvestigate it. The whole idea of free speech is, what does it actually mean? What does free speech mean? The freedom to say anything is not, a wise person does not feel free to say anything. They're in fact they feel they're only free to say what is correct and true and beneficial. And they're not free to say things which are deceptive or false, etc. So this is the difference. And this is something that what imposes on oneself, not the government doesn't impose this, it's imposed on oneself. So this is a little intro, and now I would like to go to our questions and answers. And welcome back, because we've been gone since June, I think. So this is the first one. It's a lovely day here at Birken Monastery. And perhaps you saw the video at the beginning, the scenery around here. It's autumn. It's just very, very lovely. So let us begin. Pia, give us the first question.
Ajahn, our first question is from the live stream from AS in Florida. In MN 19, the Buddha says he divided up his thinking into two sorts, and then there are subcategories regarding intention. How do you go about this type of labeling in a beneficial way?
Well, to begin with, it is beneficial to go about this. You need to know what is based on greed, hatred, and delusion, and what is based on generosity, kindness, and clarity. So this is both right intention, which right intention precedes right speech. What that is, that one has to clarify what is thought to be right. So under right intention, you have non-ill will, non-cruelty, and renunciation. And in the positive way of putting that, non-ill will would be goodwill. Non-cruelty would be compassion. And renunciation is a form of non-greed. So again, we always come back to the basics in Buddhism. Greed, hatred, and delusion is the problem. The opposites, so non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion is the solution. And non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion takes various forms. So one form of non-greed is generosity. Another form is simply the absence of grasping, or what we would call renunciation, where you no longer want to accumulate things. You feel more inclined to let things go, to live lightly. Non-cruelty could take the form of compassion or loving kindness or all kinds of equanimity. There's all kinds of positive manifestations of this. So this is what we're looking for, is clarity as well. So it's delusion and confusion is a problem, and the opposite of that is some form of clarity, or the absence of confusion and delusion. So this is what is meant, and the Buddha said, that's the first thing on the process, because before a person gets to a state where they can shut down thinking altogether and be conscious at the same time. So, at night in dreamless sleep, we shut down thinking. But can you do it while you're conscious? Can you cease from discursive activity, the endless inner dialogue, the flow of ideas? Can you be lucid and awake? That's a high accomplishment. Very, very few people can do that. That's the eighth factor of the path, which is samadhi. That is stillness, concentration, or jhana. So most people have to deal with the endless flow of thoughts and to be quite discriminating with them. And actually, it may never have occurred to a person to control their own thoughts, to control their own mind. They just accept whatever comes in as just them. But Buddhism is asking you to learn to actually spot what's going on, label what's going on. In other words, know the categories, whether they're wholesome or unwholesome, of your thoughts. And by the way, it's not just mere thoughts, it's the emotions that accompany those thoughts as well. And then to do something about it, not just to report it, not just to be aware of it, but actually to alter it, to change it, to replace it, to prevent it, to introduce new and more exalted and beneficial types of thoughts, to think deliberately or create emotions, deliberate emotions, to create them, not wait for the environment to cause you to react, but actually act towards the environment in a positive way. So this is what is meant by this, and it's put in many forms by the Buddha throughout the teachings. Pia, next question.
Our next question is from Hazel in Kamloops, BC, Canada. Greetings and gratitude, dear Ajahn Sona, and blessings to all at Birken. Our meditation group would like to study the 5 aggregates as they relate to the 3 characteristics. Where should we begin in the Buddha's teachings?
Well, hello, Hazel. And I'm sure it's a nice day where you are as well, because you're not that far from us. So, yes, I'm very pleased that the group is going to investigate the 5 khandhas. So for those who are not familiar with this term, these are the 5 aggregates or 5 categories that the Buddha divides a human into. So the first is the body. So we have a material body. So that's one of the aggregates or khandhas, one of the categories. The next is feelings. We have pleasant, neutral, painful sensations. The next is consciousness. That is that consciousness of sights, sounds, smells, taste, touches, and the activities of the mind itself. So we have 6 sense consciousness structures. And then we have perception, and perception is a form actually of memory, which is conditioned. So when you see a glass or a cup, you know that it's a cup, but actually a child who be less than a year old, sees the same object but does not know it's a cup. So the fact that it's a cup and that it's blue, that's perception. It's a form of instant learned memory that you impose over reality. So you have all kinds of perceptions which are deeply conditioned. So depending how you were raised and your family's preference for certain types of food may sway your perceptions about these things. And then volition, your intentional, what we would call your will, your moral decisions in life, your decisions that you make and carry out. These are in Pali sankhara, or volitions. So these are the khandhas, and the best way to study them. So they each of these we apply some analysis to, because this is, the Buddha says, this is the entirety of a human. What you may, if you're from a Western religious tradition, you may find that something's missing, maybe the soul. And the soul, the Buddha just says that this is the entirety of it, of what a human is. There's a body, and then there's these flowing activities of consciousness, perception, feelings, and volitions. So these are all streams of events. They're not things, they're streams. And your body is also not a thing, it's a stream of events. So that's we're imposing the three characteristics on this, on these five khandhas. Khandha, by the way, is the Pali word for your shoulder. Your shoulder is a khandha, which means only a lump. They didn't have a sophisticated, they couldn't talk more detailed about something as vague as the shoulder. In modern times, we have all kinds of anatomical ideas about the precise aspects of the shoulder and so forth. But so it's a lump of stuff. You're made of 5 lumps. So these 5 lumps need to be examined in the light that each of them is impermanent. Each of them is prone to pain in some ways, is intrinsically unsatisfactory, and because we can't stabilize them in a state of well-being, and that each of them is empty of substance. Now, this is strange, a little strange talk, but empty of substance means that whatever is flowing all the time and every aspect of it is changing all the time. If everything is changing, what is changing? So this is the same when we go into physics. We at some point, even early in Greek philosophy, they decided that when you cut something up, you can cut it in half and then cut it in half again. But when do you come to the point where you can't cut it in half anymore? There must come a point where you can't cut it in half, and that's called an atom. So this is the Greek word for that which cannot be cut. So there must be little particle at the bottom of all things that can't be cut. So we got to the 20th century, and actually we find out there are atoms. We thought, wow, those Greeks were right. But then we inquired further, and it turns out the atoms have all kinds of parts to them. And when we examine the parts, they are not lumps, indivisible lumps, they're just processes. So again, we come to this, that there's no substance, no indivisible or unchanging substance at the bottom of things. So this is what is meant by this emptiness. But we're not interested in atoms, actually. We're interested in selves, in who you are, and how this changes the way you experience the world. And this is what was called anatta, or without self. And what is meant is without a unchanging self. So many religions have this view of a self, which is immortal and eternal. And it's called a soul. It's immortal and eternal and essentially indestructible and unchangeable. The Buddha does not hold that idea. And so that's the most difficult to understand, and yet it seems the most reasonable, actually. I think in modern times we're much more able to comprehend this idea that everything is kind of a flow rather than a substance. So these are the 5 khandhas and the 3 characteristics and how to study them. One of the best ways is primarily through the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness retreat by Ajahn Sona. And all of the talks that I give on the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. So this is where the rubber hits the road. Because what are the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness? The first one is body, or rupa, materiality. The next, feelings, and then mental states, and then finally volitions. Dhamma categories it's volitions. So that's basically the five khandhas in the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. And what are you supposed to be doing with your mindfulness? And I go on endlessly about this, is that you're not supposed to be just staring at things or aware of things, that somehow awareness itself is going to fix everything. No, no, no. It is to, for the purpose of overcoming your clinging and aversion to these elements and your ignorance around these elements. So this is what mindfulness does, and it undoes the knots of misunderstandings that we have around the 5 khandhas. And if this works out, so how do you know you passed the test? Should you go take a test on this? Won't do you any good. You pass the test because you graduate to the 8th factor of the path, which is you feel some serenity and ease and peace. And so the actual point of the exercise, of this analysis, is to free you from this suffering. So anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, or pain, and this illusion of substance around, this is, and primarily around the nature of your own self and the self of others. So this is what the point of the exercise is to reduce this unsatisfactoriness by understanding and coming to full grips with the impermanence of things and the insubstantiality of things. So this is how you know that your analysis of the 5 khandhas with 3 characteristics is working, as you start to feel better. And enlightenment is that that eventually you don't go back to not feeling well. You manage in life, despite the negative things that can happen to the body, that we remain in a kind of an aloof condition, a state of equanimity and balance and emotional non-suffering, in spite of the things that remain problematic for the physical body as well. So that, in brief, is that. So all enlightenment really is attained through investigation of the 5 khandhas. So anybody gets enlightened is because they have glimpsed, their insight arises from their investigation of the 5 hindrances through the 3 characteristics. So there you go. You just got a super condensed version of the entire teachings of the Buddha. Let's go on, Pia.
Our next question is from John in the live chat from Toronto. Would a stream enterer or once returner intentionally get into a marriage? How would their attainment affect their marriage and relationships with normal householders?
Yes, stream enterers. Stream enterer is the first stage of enlightenment, and this was very widely attained in the time of the Buddha. There were many thousands of lay people who attained the first stage of enlightenment, and they got into marriages, and they remained in marriages with people who were not enlightened. In fact, were really outside had difficulty with virtue, etc. So there's a few stories about, there was one woman who attained stream entry, and she was married to a hunter. So hunting, going out to hunt animals on a daily basis is not a Buddhist idea. You don't go out and kill animals. But she was married to that person, and she did not divorce. And the Buddha said, well, they have a long samsaric relationship. They've been around each other for a long time in samsara through lifetimes, and so there's still an attachment there. So the Sotapanna is not freed from all of the. They have some insights, which liberates them to some degree from worldly attitudes, and their virtue is has a very high standard. They're very virtuous, but they can still indulge in certain emotions, and one of them is desire and attachment to another person, and that person may not be enlightened as well. So how it will affect these marriages? Sometimes it will cause them to dissolve. It's possible, especially as the person moves on and pursues Dhamma. But it may in fact improve the marriage. The influence of the Sotapanna on the other person in the marriage may be effective and very positive influence as well. So, as I say, yes, one can remain in the marriage. You not necessarily remain in the marriage. You might remain in the marriage, but it happens. It does happen. Yeah.
Our next question is from the live chat from Random Ramblings. How does one practice renunciation of owning so much stuff? How does one let go quickly on a very large scale? I cling and crave to physical possessions, and I need help.
Yeah, that very common. It's primarily an attitude change. I think it's quite natural for humans to like their possessions, but as one goes on, one realizes that you're burdened by these possessions. They don't help you. They don't improve the quality of your life. So this is what you want, is an improved quality of your life. And you got to examine the idea that you like your possessions. Do you really? Or do they just represent something to you? Do they represent security or abundance or something? Because they aren't in themselves either security or abundance, and they aren't love themselves. So sometimes we substitute an object. The object becomes a symbol of something that we want, and we're just projecting into it. So a teddy bear is simply not. It's just stuffing. We got to realize that at some point. So these things have sentimental value sometimes, but they have other things as well. But you have to say, I'm aspiring to greater happiness, lightness, and well-being, and I just can't allow it to be just a bunch of bric-a-brac and things. Yeah, I'm looking for something better than things. And if you're looking for a feeling of security and well-being, then you really have to look higher than a bunch of things. So that's how you, at the root of often this collection stuff it's an attempt to fill a void. And when you sit down and start to nourish yourself with good ideas and the good association with others, then as that void fills up, then the possessions fall away. And you can see this can go to extremes. There's all kinds of these hoarder things. this hoarding thing used to be a kind of a remarkable, rare occurrence. I remember reading an entire book about hoarders. These were a couple of brothers who were famous for hoarding. And this is in the early 1900s or late 1890s. And I was interested, well, why do people do this? Well, what was that about? That's a strange thing. These guys were quite intelligent and they were from a good family. They were really well off. They didn't need to work. But they spent their days and nights roaming around New York, picking up every piece of junk they could find and taking it back to this gigantic apartment that they had in a well-to-do area of New York. And they never married, and they filled this place up to the extent, and even old newspapers and stuff. They could not get in. Eventually, they were climbing through a tunnel of newspapers to get into this giant apartment. And then eventually, some of the newspapers fell down one day and crushed one of them, trapped him in there, and he began to rot and everything. It was a terrible smell. And finally, the police broke the door down and found this incredible. And I thought, that is extraordinary. I mean, I was trying to grasp what does that to people? Why would you do that? But it turns out it's not that uncommon. There's endless cases of this. So this is something that is built into human psychology, but it seems that always at the root of it is that one is trying to fill a void, an emotional void, with the collection of these objects. And the objects, we talked previously about perception. So the person perceives that object as desirable, valuable, even as an old moldy cucumber or something like this, or an old piece of plastic. These things, often they're filthy and totally without value, and yet the person sees it as valuable. So this is perception. So that perception has to be undone, and then it all falls away. So one has to work on perception and emotional restoration. Yeah. Okay.
Our next question is from the live chat from Lake in Portland. Dear Ajahn, my job requires that I track a lot of information and news daily in a political environment, and it can be overwhelming. What advice do you have for balancing this?
Well, if you have to do this as a livelihood, then you really need to start with detachment. And the first thing in the day is that this is just, a lot of it is charged, emotional language charged with, as I talked about in the beginning of this, or in the talk that I gave at the beginning of the Q&A. So you have to say, none of this is just theater. It's just theater. It's comedy and tragedy. However, you are not, you're more or less working in a movie theater as the projectionist, and you're going to see the same thing played out 1,000 times. After a while, the projectionist is just sitting back there reading a book, watching the movie. So you can process these things quite easily. Something interesting that Thoreau said. Thoreau, the writer of Walden, who spent a few years in a cabin on Walden Pond, and he said that today's newspaper is stale. If you've heard about one murder, you've heard about them all. Whereas the ancient texts are always fresh and alive. So the essential truths of life are fresh and alive. And when you come to work to look at the newspaper, look at it and understand this is stale. There is no news there. Nothing is new there. The great truths are always fresh, and you can begin your day by refreshing yourself with the great and high truths of life, and then you will see you can sort through the stale orange peels and garbage of the daily news and the so-called enthralling events of the political situation with a detached eye that says, this is pure theater. Yeah.
Our next question is from the live chat from Lisa. My father is in hospice right now, and I would have to cut short a vacation, the first in 8 years, to go 1,000 miles to see him. I am mixed. I saw him 6 weeks ago and had a great visit. Advice?
Yeah, I can't tell you what to do there. It's up to you. Everybody dies. And especially during the pandemic, I've had several people die during the pandemic that are close to me. And under normal circumstances, I would have gone and visited him, but half the time you're going to accelerate their death by showing up and giving them COVID and so forth. So these places are often highly very careful with visitors as well. Normally hospices they welcome all visitors, but in the pandemic, it just accelerates people's demise, So this is an extra dimension at this time, and it's quite understandable if it's awkward and difficult and maybe problematic to get to somebody as near the time of their death. The thing you should not feel is guilt about it. You're not going to prevent their deaths. You wish them well. You have a whole history, and it's the final departing time is not it's a very small fraction of one's life anyway. It's the large experience of the relationship over time. And the relationship, of course, will go on. That person is going to die, but you will be in regular communion with them in your mind. You will think about them, especially soon after they die. You'll be thinking about them all the time. And so that the richness of the relationship tends to go on. You may want to do something for them after they die, which is do something charitable in their name. So donate to a food bank or feed something, feed someone, develop a scholarship for somebody or something like that. That will be in some ways more valuable use of your time than just hanging around in a hospice while somebody is semi-conscious.
Our next question is from the live chat from Frisco Wolf. The Abrahamics have ruined the terms, quote, right and, quote, wrong for me, but I find that, quote, skillful and unskillful resonate deeply. Is this an acceptable way of categorizing speech and behavior?
The Abrahamics?
Abrahamics.
The Abrahamics.
I'm so sorry.
The Abrahamics.
Abrahamics. I apologize.
Well, okay, so the Abrahamics are the three religions. The Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are often called the Abrahamic religions. So they have Abraham as a kind of a founding father. So yeah, good and bad. Yeah, the moralistic things. So the Buddha is really talking about skill and like skillful and unskillful. Good and evil are really based in ignorance and wisdom, and it's just a form of. So when you are a piano player and you play badly, it's not a moral thing. It's the fact that you just don't have the skills. If you play real good, then it's because you practice your scales and you have some musical talent. And the same in life. You're playing a game in life. You're playing the music of life, and some people play it very badly. Why do they play it badly? Why are they, quote, bad? It's because they don't have the skill. They're not kusala. They don't have the skill. They're akusala, not skillful. They don't have the information and so forth. So ignorance is the root of it. I think they some people in those traditions understand that the roots of these things, not just evil, it's ignorance. So I think the last words of Christ were, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." So this is Christ's understands this. Why are they crucifying him, and why are these Roman soldiers there, and all this kind of? They don't know what they're doing. They're ignorant. So that's why they're doing it. And he's saying, "Forgive them, Father. They're just ignorant." So in a way, we can understand what we get angry about as evil people and so forth, is that they don't know what they're doing. So they're making, from their point of view, they're choosing the right thing to do. But we know, because we're more educated or skilled, that that's not the right thing to do. But that's really at the root of it. Ignorance is at the root of it. And in Buddhism, that's the same thing. Greed, hatred, and delusion or ignorance. So ignorance is the root of both greed and hatred. Wisdom is the root of generosity and kindness. So that's what it boils down to. So if you want to use skillful and unskillful rather than good and bad or evil, etc., by all means do.
Ajahn, our last question for today is from Michael on the live chat. I have a tendency to chat in an excitable, rambling, and discursive manner, easily flying off on tangents. Should I rather try to keep my speech always tempered and measured so as to practice right speech?
Yes, you should. You should actually commit to that. And there's interesting ways of catching right speech. You know, various, in monasteries, you're really watching your speech. And there's various tricks. You can walk around with a pebble or something solid in your mouth, so that before you speak, you have to take it out of your mouth. Or you can also hold a little bit of water in your mouth, and you have to swallow before you can speak. Otherwise, you dribble down. So these are little tricks to remind you that before you open your mouth, you know, what is the attitude behind it. And this is a very good exercise to take on. You know, it can be a year-long process to say, like, let me speak less, and let me speak more skillfully, and let me take this on as a year-long project. And you will have a good return on investment from that. Yeah. So I think we are coming to the end of our first question and answer and short Dhamma talk for this upcoming year from October on. We hope to continue these on a weekly basis. Nothing is certain in life, but that's our plan at the moment. So without further ado, that is it for Q&A.